Exactly 9 days ago, I showed you in a video. Yo friends, this is the setup I currently see as the most realistic that will correct down again, treat the old zone as a support zone and see a bounce from there. This is exactly the chart I showed you. This is what it looked like. And now take a look at what has happened since then. We really did go down again here, treated this as a support zone and saw a very nice bounce from here. So exactly as I mentioned and explained in the video 9 days ago, and for logical reasons why. And that's exactly how it played out. Please leave a like and a comment today for this level of precision. Thank you, friends. Why did I see it this way? Because we've simply been in this zone with Bitcoin for quite a long time now. And take a look at this, especially this zone here. It's really exciting because we've already found support here several times, particularly in the range between $108,000 and $112,000. It's just one of those zones where we've often encountered resistance. So here we were below it, here as well, here too, and here again. But especially in this zone, in this area, we've faced significant resistance. And this was our last all-time high. Accordingly, it makes sense that this can quickly become a resistance zone or conversely, a support zone. Here, it was a resistance zone the entire time. Now this is a support zone that we might test at most and then continue to rise from there because that's exactly what just happened. And from here, we're now right in this very interesting range. At this point, of course, it's difficult to determine where things will go next. Nevertheless, I want to share my assessment with you, as I always do. And while that always makes me vulnerable, I do it gladly. And at this point, feel free to join our trading VIP group. There, I always show you first when and how I open trades, and I also show you what I expect next for Bitcoin and the general altcoin sector, as well as the overall market. So definitely check it out. All the information is in the description. It's 100% free. At the current moment, we're in this exciting range, and I just have to say, since we've held up so well here, I clearly tend to believe that we'll at least reach the $120,000 mark, maybe correct downwards again afterwards. We'll have to see how things develop because at $120,000 to $123,000, we have two very interesting support zones. Accordingly, I expect with about 80% probability that we'll see a bounce towards $120,000 in the next few days. I just think that we'll tap into that liquidity there again because just look at it. All the liquidity is up here at $119,000, $120,000. I just think that's what we'll go for next. Right now, everything just points to that for me. We've already tapped into it on the downside. Now I can really imagine that we'll grab the money here again, and very likely from there, we'll head back down somehow, maybe dip in there again, and maybe that'll actually be the next longer sideways phase that we're currently seeing with Bitcoin. But first, I'm expecting the $120,000. From there, we'll take another look at the whole situation. But the biggest surprise once again is simply Ethereum. Ethereum is completely outperforming Bitcoin. Yesterday, we broke through the $4,000 mark, which was very important. We finally broke through it, and today we're already at $4,160. We even hit $4,200 today. It's crazy what's happening here. Once again, we've got a ton of momentum coming in. Yeah, a lot of liquidity. You just have to say everything is currently focused on Ethereum. Institutions are continuously building up their reserves. There are even organizations that are selling Bitcoin and investing in Ethereum instead. This Ethereum reserve is growing really large, and right now, that's just absolutely huge. But what also needs to be mentioned here is that since we just broke through the $4,000 mark, there were a lot of shorts that got liquidated, which of course led to an even bigger bounce. And that's definitely nice because we really had a very strong support zone here, which we finally managed to break through. I mean, you can see how many times we've retested it. Also back then in the past, it happened very often. This area where we are currently standing is very significant. Tested so many times. It would be important for us to see a bounce above it now so that in the future we can see it as a support zone and not as a resistance zone. It would be great if we could see it as a support zone. At the moment, it definitely looks like we're on our way there. We'll have to wait and see over the next few days because actually from now on, you could almost say we have a green light for Ethereum. And it will get very interesting if Ethereum manages to break its previous all-time high around $4,800. If we break that, I believe retail investors will really start coming back in because that's not really the case at the moment. I mean, Ethereum is in such a good position and yet we still don't really have retail investors here. We're slowly starting to see a few people coming back into the market, yes, but it's still nothing significant. I think you can always see this quite clearly here. During the last Bitcoin rally, the Coinbase app was ranked 13th. It was really popular among all the apps. These days, we've climbed so much higher, significantly higher, and yet among all the apps, we're ranked 157th. That just shows how little retail is in the market these days, and you can clearly see that even though we're much higher, there's still less retail participation, simply because the market was cleaned out by this correction. But in the long run, that's actually very good. In the long run, this allows us to climb significantly higher. Otherwise, with Ethereum, as I said, things will get very interesting if we break the old all-time high. I think that wouldn't just bring in retail investors, we'd basically have a clear path for our wave 3, because in this cycle, I'm expecting at least $8,000 for Ethereum. At least, at the very least. It could easily reach $10,000 or $12,000, but at the very least, $8,000. And I stand by this opinion. That's the minimum we should expect to see with Ethereum. It could even go towards $15,000 or something like that, but let's aim for our $8,000 first. We should be satisfied with that for now. As I said, things will get really interesting once we break through the previous all-time high. And what we've just seen in the crypto sector is exactly what we need right now, especially with the altcoins. We've now seen that Chainlink, the organization behind it, has announced that they are building a Chainlink reserve. And that's extremely positive, because Chainlink is now much more than just a cryptocurrency. There's a huge company behind it, which actually has a lot of real-world applications. And now, with the revenue they have, they're simply going to buy back their own coins, lock them away, and use them as a reserve. A company would only do that if they truly believed in their own project. That, of course, gives Chainlink a huge boost. It also makes Chainlink significantly scarcer. And what's also important here is Chainlink has now grown so large that they also have revenue streams that don't run through the Chainlink token. And now, even those revenues would end up finding their way into the Link token. That's really awesome. With that, we would finally have a bit of utility for this coin, a bit of a reason behind buying the coin, because now you can buy Chainlink knowing the organization is going to pump millions of dollars into it every year anyway, because they're building up Chainlink as a reserve. That's ultimately what makes stock companies like Apple, Microsoft, Google, and Amazon so highly valued, because these companies themselves buy back their own shares for billions of dollars, since they believe in their stock and want to keep the price stable. And if cryptocurrencies start doing the same thing, then it gets really interesting, because the whole point of cryptocurrency is that the coin is used and as a result becomes increasingly scarce. The problem is, most projects simply have too little real-world use for that alone to be enough to push the coin. But there are very few companies that are truly profitable here that actually generate several million per month in fees and general revenue, and of course, they can reinvest that back into their coins. A huge step forward for the altcoin sector. And from a technical analysis perspective with Chainlink, I have to say, we've really broken through a multi-year downtrend here. You just have to acknowledge that. But of course, that was already a few days ago. Now, after this announcement, we've seen another nice bounce here, and things get interesting in this zone because we have significant resistance here. You can see it here as well. If you rewind a bit, there's simply greater resistance here. This was also the all-time high back then, and it was tested and touched several times here. That's why this is definitely a larger zone that will be interesting. What needs to happen here is a sustained breakout from this area. If things were to play out like that, then this zone up here around $30 would be interesting, because that's where we also have major resistance. If we manage to break through that as well and do so sustainably, then there's room to move up towards $100 or even $150, because as you know, my price targets for Chainlink in this cycle are at least $100. But that's easy. We should definitely see $100. And yes, Chainlink is a great project. It's truly one of the few projects that actually has real-world use and generates a lot of money, and as a result, they're able to offer that. I'm telling you, not every crypto project will be able to offer this in the future, because most projects simply don't generate any money, and most coins are just useless. But this is definitely already the right step in the right direction. And I think most people have kind of heard about this because Donald Trump has now allowed US 401k retirement accounts to invest in cryptocurrencies. And people have read this headline, but I'm almost certain that most people, including my viewers, don't really understand what this actually means. Because with this regulation, US citizens are now allowed to invest in cryptocurrencies using these retirement funds, these retirement accounts. That was frowned upon for a long time. For a long time, all retirement funds said, no, we won't invest in that, it's too risky and so on. But that's changing now because of this. This is extremely positive because there's a lot of money behind these retirement funds, and this regulatory change simply opens up a whole new playing field. It simply opens new doors for us to much more liquidity and so on. Because this change affects over 90 million US citizens, so quite a lot of people. And in total, they manage assets worth $12.5 trillion. And by that, I mean the German trillions. I mean, you can see this number here as well, and just how much money we're talking about. These pension funds have an enormous amount of money behind them. Of course, I'm also fully aware that not all that money will flow in right away, but if just a few percent of those $12 trillion go into cryptocurrencies, then Bitcoin could quickly be tens of thousands of dollars higher. And that's extremely positive. I mean, just in the long term, what this does to the crypto market is incredible. And this simply gives us much more room to maneuver for retail investors. Because if it comes to that, there's a chance that every grandma and grandpa in the US will be investing in Bitcoin to some extent, maybe even partly without realizing it, but that just gives us an enormous amount of liquidity. I mean, we're talking about 12.5 trillion US dollars here. The entire crypto market is only worth about 3.5 trillion US dollars. That means the money in pension funds alone is about 4 times the total crypto market cap. And as I said, only a few percent need to flow into the crypto market, and the situation will look completely different for us. And yes, things are looking really interesting right now because the charts are actually quite bullish in some cases, especially when it comes to altcoins like Ethereum. Ethereum is the leader. If it performs well, that naturally bodes well for the altcoins too. That already looks interesting, but especially in times like these, when we hear so much bullish news, when we see this and that, you have to be a bit cautious again, because that's exactly when the market can quickly turn around. I mean, we're not insanely overheated anymore. If we look at the funding rate, it actually looks fine so far. There's definitely still room to move up. But still, the higher we climb, the more cautious we need to be. And I'd definitely be interested to hear your opinions on this. What do you think? How do you currently assess the market? Do you think we'll see a bigger correction in August or September than what we've seen so far? Or can you imagine that this will be the next consolidation phase for Bitcoin until around September, and that maybe at the end of September we could start rising again? Or is this already the last phase of euphoria? I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on that. So definitely let me know, and I'd also say check out the VIP trading group. All the details are in the description. See you next time, friends. Ciao.